3 Years a Prime Minister by Geoff Buckingham.
Excuse me, sir. How would you like to buy your wife some lovely red roses to celebrate the good news then?
Good news? What do you mean?
Oh, sorry, mister, it's just I thought you'd like to celebrate like the others. Now that he's gone and all that. And some nice English roses would brighten up any gentleman's home.
I'm sorry,
And
but...
I must be honest with you, sir. I ain't got no husband. And I've got 6 hungry mouths to feed. It ain't easy for a working girl these days.
Keep the roses, but take this. I hope that it helps you.
Blimey! That'll certainly cheer my babies up. Might even be able to get myself a drop of gin as well with that. You're a proper gent, you is. Thank you, sir. But forgive me for asking. Why do you look so sad?
Do you not know?
Well, not really. I mean, I've heard bits of news and that, but I don't really understand it all. You look like a learned man. So what's happened then? Oh, by the way, my name's Nell.
It's all rather complicated, Nell, but I will do my best to explain it to you.
Well, let's sit down here then, sir. I'm listening.
It really all started not long after the younger William Pitt died.
Oh, yeah, I remember him. My old dad, God rest his soul, he used to like him. He said Pitt was a proper gent.
Yes, Nell, he was indeed. He was greatly missed. But there is one person in France who was particularly pleased that he was no longer around.
That is wonderful news, Philippe. I knew these British dogs would not be able to cope for long. I hated that louse Pete, but he was by far the most formidable man they had. So, now they are in disarray, eh, Philippe?
Yes, indeed, Emperor. Old King George has tried several times to patch up his government. But it is like trying to replace a mighty whale with a tiny goldfish.
I think, Philippe, you are giving the British the benefit. I don't think they have anyone as big as a goldfish.
That is good. Yet another crisis across the Channel. I'm very sure soon the support for the misguided Wellington will drain away too. Yes, this is good news indeed. 1809 could prove a momentous year for us after all. We must capitalize on this. Philippe, Henri, make sure our troops are ready. Make sure our ships are ready. There will not be a man in Britain who can stop us now.
Good morning, Mr. Perceval. His Majesty the King will see you straight away.
Thank you. Good morning, Your Highness.
Chancellor, Mr. Perceval, take a seat.
Thank you, Your Highness. It is good to see you look somewhat better.
You know full well I do not look that much better. However, I did not summon you to Windsor Castle to boost my morale. I called you about the position.
Oh, I see. Your Highness, may I please be given a chance to fully explain that every decision I have made as Chancellor, even the very unpopular ones, have been made after careful thought and consideration and in the best interest of this...
Yes, I know. It's not that job I want to talk to you about. You're as good a Chancellor as I have had for many a year. You don't flinch from difficult decisions. but I want to talk to you about being Prime Minister.
Prime Minister? That would be a most gracious honour, Your Highness. Forgive me for seeming reticent, but are you sure?
I wouldn't be asking you if I wasn't sure. Other possible candidates are unwilling, unable, or unsavoury. Your colleagues recommend you. I trust you. And I know that you are a man of faith. I want you to take the job, Perceval.
I will certainly very much consider it, Your Highness. By your leave, I will head straight home and discuss it with Mrs. Perceval and...
Damn it, Perceval. There's no time for that sort of thing. I don't want you to do the job for yourself or your family. I want you to take the Prime Ministership because I need you to do it. And although they may not know it, the people of Great Britain and Ireland also need you to do it.
I see, Your Highness. And who have you got in mind for replacing me as Chancellor of the Exchequer?
In all probability, Perceval, you will have to continue to do that job as well. I don't see anybody else up to that task. Certainly none of your predecessors' cabinet colleagues have the inclination nor the courage to do it. I've already asked them. But you will, of course, be paid for both offices. You will, in fact, have 2 salaries.
That is very gracious of you, Your Highness. If I have to do both tasks, then I will. But only pay me for one of them.
Would that my eldest son, George, Prince of Wales, be of such unselfish grace and frugality, Perceval. I cannot tell you how grateful I am. I know that you may not always get gratitude elsewhere, but by the grace of God, I wish you every good fortune. Prime Minister, above all things, please keep my people safe.
I will do all in my power, Your Highness.
May God be with you.
And may God be with you too, Your Highness. And now, with your permission, I must go back to London and form my cabinet.
I wish you well with that, Perceval. Taking on Napoleon is one thing, but dealing with your adversaries in Westminster is quite another.
So that's how Mr. Perceval became Prime Minister then?
Yes. King George III didn't really give him any option. And despite his failing health, the king was very crafty. He appealed to Spencer Perceval's better nature. But frankly, it was the king's last hope. Others had turned their back on the opportunity or had fallen out over petty rivalries.
Well, I never knew that. But what if Mr. Perceval had said no?
I shudder to think what would have happened. There were so many rumbles of discontent in the country that if it had got out that the entire cabinet, or at least those worthy of consideration, had all refused the king, who knows what may have happened.
Oh, what, you mean a revolution like what happened in France?
It doesn't bear thinking about, Nell. But it was vital that the country was seen to have a workable government. So, although no one had ever thought Spencer Perceval was really cut out to be Prime Minister, he suddenly found himself the head of the government of one of the most powerful countries in the world. But a country with big problems and daunting challenges.
Daisy. Here, sit yourself down and have some nice plum pudding. I think I'll join you. I've been on my legs all day cooking for this meeting tonight. I'm told it's going to go on very late indeed. Well, it's all happening here in 10 Downing Street, isn't it?
So what's going on then, Mrs. Millerton? There seems to be a buzz in the air, but nobody's told me what's happening.
Well, I'm not allowed to say.
I heard someone out in the street say we got a new Prime Minister.
No.
Is it that George Canning bloke?
No, it's certainly not. It's a chap called Spencer Perceval.
Who's he then?
Well, it all came as a big surprise to me. He's a nice enough chap. He's always been a studious sort of minister, but I never had him down for the top job.
Is he that quiet bloke who was a good friend of William Pitt the Younger, often has a prayer book with him?
Yes, that's him. He thought the world of our late Mr. Pitt. Now, he was a good Prime Minister, well, most of the time. He struggled a bit towards the end, so he didn't like being unpopular or anything like that. Mind you, same goes for Addington and Lord Greville and everyone that had high hopes of him. What with his so-called Ministry of Talents, well, they couldn't have been that talented. I mean, they didn't last 5 minutes. Oh, they didn't half squabble. I used to hear them up there arguing like there was no tomorrow. Then poor old Lord Portland, he had to take over. Well, he couldn't cope either. As Canning and Casterly gave him no end of trouble. They behaved like two naughty urchins, always arguing and picking on each other. Of course, they both wanted to be Prime Minister, didn't they? So when old Portland resigned, everyone thought he was going to be one of them too, but then the silly blighters had one almighty row. Do you know they even challenged each other to a duel?
I did hear something about it, but I didn't believe it. Did it really happen?
Oh, yes, it did.
What, you mean they actually fired a pistol at each other?
Yes.
Did they kill each other?
Well, they could have hardly done that because they're both still walking around. No, it seems their marksmanship was as bad as their manners. Anyway, Casterly found out that Portland was going to replace him because Canning threatened to resign if he didn't. Anyway, it all got out of hand. That nitwit Canning challenged Casterly to a duel. Apparently he'd never even fired a pistol before. Mind you, he must have been the better shooter of the two because at least he shot Casterly in the thigh.
Oh, that could have been nasty.
Well, it certainly would have put paid to his visits to the tavern for his nightly tipple. That's the one thing I could say about this Spencer Perceval. He seems a pretty straight bloke. You know, who don't mess around with drinking or nothing like that.
Unlike many of them.
Oh, yes, indeed. Here, tell you what I can also say about Perceval. He don't take any nonsense. Before he became Cabinet Minister, he was the one who was the lawyer in those court cases against the Prince Regent.
No.
Yes. Oh, well, the Prince Regent, he went balmy about that. He was trying to get rid of his wife on the grounds of adultery, because he said she'd had a baby by another man. Turns out all she'd done was to adopt a little child. Perceval, the clever clogs, even came up with the evidence that the Prince Regent's wife hadn't ever been pregnant.
Oh, that must have been embarrassing for the Prince Regent. I'm told he doesn't like not getting his own way.
Oh, he certainly don't. I heard Lord Chatham telling Mr. Ryder that the Prince had vowed to get rid of Perceval as soon as he can.
But ain't that down to the King?
Well, it is technically, but poor old King George III ain't been good these few years, you know. In fact, his health has picked up a bit just when they was about to hand over to the monarch's power to the Prince Regent. But my guess is it won't be long before the Prince Regent will take over. And then the sparks are really gonna fly. He'll be gunning for old Perceval.
Well, let's hope he's a better shot than Canning or Casterly, then.
Anyway, I bet Mrs. Perceval in Ealing is a proud woman tonight.
Prime Minister? That's terrible. Oh, Spencer, you sure you have done the right thing? I don't know whether to swell up with pride or shiver with fear. Wouldn't the king let you think about it for a while?
No, he would not. Our sovereign is a good man and a Christian man, but he's also a rather wily old fox. He knew full well that if he had given me time to discuss it with you, then I may not have accepted. I'm no fool. I know I was his last resort. After what happened in France during the Revolution, he no doubt wants to save his head as well as his country. No, darling, I was only joking.
You didn't even want to be a politician, let alone a cabinet member. You do realise you'll constantly have William Wilberforce and William Cobbett knocking at your door?
Yes, I've got lots of time for Wilberforce. He has opened the eyes and hearts of millions. I'd like to think I can build on the good work of him and dear Mr. Pitt by getting rid of the appalling injustice of slavery altogether.
That won't be easy. But what about Cobbett?
That will be even more tricky. He puts himself up as the heroic champion of the working classes, yet he sees no inconsistency in his support for slavery and all sorts of hideous pastimes like bull baiting, and he gets dangerously close to inciting violent disorder.
A horrid man.
Horrid? No. Irritating? Oh, yes. But he does keep government on its toes, and maybe that's a good thing. And I would far rather have him knocking on our door than Napoleon Bonaparte.
You are too good-natured for this job, Spencer. You sure you wish to take it on?
Too late for that, Jane. I've already taken it on. I appreciate your concern, but please do not worry. On the carriage ride back from Windsor Castle, I had lots of time to think. Very few men in this country ever get the chance and the privilege to head our government. This is an opportunity for me to serve our country and a chance to make a difference. If I had said no, how could I stand on the sidelines and criticise, as I often do, and then reconcile my conscience? There is much to be done in this country, and I have a chance to do it. But I will certainly need the grace of God to do so.
You always said you thought adultery should be a criminal offence. Well, maybe now you can make that the law.
No, I cannot do that.
Why not?
Half of my cabinet would land up in prison.
I love you, Spencer Perceval, even though I think you are a fool at times. Let us call the children in and tell them about your new job.
Yes, Jane, let us tell them all, but we must do so with calmness. We cannot cause them any more worry. And then I must be off to the House of Commons within the next hour. Napoleon Bonaparte's forces are gathering, and Wellington needs a decision from Parliament with the utmost urgency. God willing, we shall make the right decision.
What? You mean my father, the king, has invited Spencer Perceval to be Prime Minister? That jumped-up lawyer who seemed determined to make life difficult for me?
My dear Prince, I gather there was no one else available. It seems that the king thought he had no real option.
Oh, surely, Oswald, there must be somebody better. I know Canning and Castle blotted their copybook, but what about Lord Liverpool and some of the others?
I understand on good authority that they did not have the inclination to take on the job, sir. nor that of Chancellor. I'm afraid these positions are currently seen as poisoned chalices. And though I hate to say it, if we were to have a revolution, their heads would be the first to meet Madame Guillotine.
Well, mine would soon follow. What are Perceval's chances of lasting in this job?
Very slim. It's very difficult to envisage him getting past the next few months. There are not even enough capable men prepared to serve in the cabinet, so he will have to do most of the work himself. And as you know, sir, Parliament is very torn these days. The Whigs will be constantly at his throat, the Independents seem to want radicalism, and the Tories are very divided.
But the news isn't all bad then. He'll be too preoccupied with that lot, and Napoleon Bonaparte, to keep meddling in my affairs. With father's health deteriorating daily, I'll effectively be the monarch before too long.
Well, sir, I do hear rumours that Perceval does plan to limit the regency powers somewhat, and to put a cap on your allowances.
What? Over my dead body? Or his?
I'm sorry to disturb you, Lord Wellington.
Oh, can't it wait, Captain White? I am rather weary. Not the easiest of days since we got to Portugal.
It's the farmhouse in the valley, sir.
And what about it?
Well, Napoleon's men got there before us.
And are they still there?
No, sir, they have left.
And is the farmer there?
Yes, sir. And his family.
Oh, that's good.
No, it's not good, sir.
Why isn't it?
They've all had their throats cut.
Oh, my God!
That poor family. I didn't know old Boney's lot done that sort of thing.
Some of their soldiers do. So did some of their revolutionaries. That is exactly why Perceval was so worried about the threat of invasion.
But if Boney's army was in Portugal, why did we need to worry? And what was they doing there anyway?
Good question, Snell. Our army was there to help the Portuguese and the Spanish defeat Napoleon's army. But it has to be said, we were also there to thwart Napoleon's plans so that it became more difficult for him to send his invasion force over here. But the threat was growing all the time.
Well, I knew we was worried about Boney, but I thought it was just a rumour. You know, like what we'd been told so as we wouldn't get too upset about government taxes and that.
Well, that was a tricky one for Perceval. He had to keep the taxes high so that he could make sure that we could keep Wellington's army and our navy well supplied and fed. However, at all cost, we had to avoid panicking our people. But the pressure in Parliament was growing for more and more money.
You'll be throwing good money after bad. Wellington will just have to make do with what he's got.
Would you respect my right honourable friend? That would be the utmost folly. Wellington's army would then be at risk from starvation and massacre, and the people of this country would soon be facing their darkest hour.
That's what you say.
That's what I know.
That is a most outrageous statement, Prime Minister. You are scaremongering. You are feeding and equipping Wellington's army purely out of vanity and empire building.
I think you are wrong there, Sir Francis. Although I share some concern at the cost, I really do not think it wise to underestimate the threat from Napoleon. I received reports earlier today from very reliable sources that he is planning to attack us. Not just from France, but from Ireland, even from America too.
And if that doesn't work, he will try to starve us with his trade embargoes. I fully understand all your concerns, gentlemen, but I will not be moved. You must back me on this.
Or what? King George will not support you forever. Indeed, he may not be capable of supporting anyone if the rumours are true that his health is again failing.
I feel sure that I could summon enough support for a change of plan, Prime Minister.
Oh, you are on very dangerous territory, Ratcliffe.
Gentlemen, please, we've nothing to gain by making threats and acting like rabble. I suggest we all take a short period to reflect and discuss this again in 2 or 3 hours' time.
Then maybe you'll stop thinking like idiots.
I suggest you withdraw that insulting comment, Burdett.
Prime Minister, gentlemen, I'm sorry to interrupt, but news has just come through of Napoleon's fleet. He now has at least 600 ships, and my source informs me that many of them destined for making their way across the Channel.
Good heavens, Lord Bathurst. Are you absolutely sure?
I am, but that's not all. I'm sorry to tell you, Prime Minister, but my messenger has just arrived with news about outbreaks of more civil disorder in the mills of Yorkshire and Nottinghamshire. And there are a number of riots in West Riding.
Thank you, Lord Bathurst. I think, gentlemen, that we have no time to waste. I will deal with these matters as I think fit, and I would ask that Parliament supports me in this.
So, they got behind him then?
Just about, Nell. Just about. He could not always get enough support from his own Tory MPs, but one way or the other he would manage to get just enough votes from the Whigs and sometimes the independent MPs to get his measures through. A number of his own cabinet members were losing their nerve. Meanwhile, several thousands of miles away, there was another individual, John Bellingham.
Darling, I hope this letter finds you and our beloved children all well. I'm still being left to rot in this stinking Russian hellhole. And as far as I can tell, the British government are doing nothing to assist me. So much for trying to boost Britain's trade with the rest of the world. As soon as some poor wretch hits difficulty, the Ambassador Leveson Gower turns his back on them. I write to him regularly, but I have only had one reply. He says it is not the fault of the British government. Not their fault. Of course it is their fault. They should have acted to ensure that one of their citizens was not so wrongly imprisoned. If and when I do get out, I will no doubt be bankrupt. Surely that's no way to reward enterprise. I will make them pay.
Now, Spencer, all I want you to do today is to put your feet up and have some rest.
Have some rest? That is rather unlikely with our little rascals, but I do cherish it all the same. Just slipping away from Downing Street, even if just for a day, is refreshment indeed. Are you enjoying your time here in Ealing, Jane?
Yes, this lovely big house is just what we needed. Although with all 14 of us here at the same time today, it may still seem a bit crowded. But we are very fortunate.
Yes. You know, £7,500 seemed an awful lot of money to spend just to live in Ealing. But I'm not complaining now. It's so nice to be here in the countryside with no hustle and bustle. London can be very stimulating, but I really do appreciate times like this when I can just enjoy the more gentle surroundings with all of you. I thank God that our children have all inherited your sweetness, Jane, albeit in different degrees. I must confess, though, that not a day goes by when I do not think of our poor young Charles.
Yes, me too. He would have been nearly 14 years old by now. We would have seen him emerging as a bright, shining young man.
Indeed. I can empathise with our king on this. Losing his daughter Amelia last month has hit him really hard. She was the apple of his eye. The manner of her passing really seared the pain of her loss deep into the king's heart. Lord knows he was not in good condition before that. And then to have everything compounded by tittle-tattle from that evil-minded Villiers, that must have been the last straw.
How was the king when you saw him yesterday?
Well, frankly, it upsets me to even talk about his condition. To see our king talking to figurines as if they are real human beings is most pitiful. When I walked into the room, he thought I was the gardener. It was worse still for Lord Liverpool. When he arrived, the king thought he was the dog.
Well, you must be thankful for something then. What next for the king?
Well, we will, of course, continue to get the best medical treatment we can for him, but I'm not optimistic about that. Although it doesn't bear thinking about, I must now revive the Regency Act. I shall do so with a very heavy heart.
So that means the Prince Regent will effectively become the monarch?
Yes, but if I have anything to do with it, his powers will be limited a little. Oh, I shall look forward to those meetings with him. I'm probably his least favourite politician. And I struggle to understand his ways. Yet he is bright, clever and knowledgeable.
But I'm not sure I can totally respect a monarch who constantly prefers a girl and a bottle to politics and a sermon.
I will certainly find that difficult too.
Well, I'm sure you will cope, Spencer. You always seem to. I just hope he learns to like you.
I do not delude myself. I think he will merely join a long list of individuals who would much rather I had remained as a practicing lawyer in Northampton.
Things was getting really tough for him then.
Yes, it was almost like a noose was tightening around his neck. But it was not just trouble at home and in Europe that concerned him. Things were happening on far distant Caribbean shores that had a huge impact on many countries, and something had to be done.
What have you got to say for yourself?
I'm sorry, Master Hawkins. I could not do any more. I was just so tired. The heat really got to me, Master. I haven't been sleeping because my baby daughter has been ill.
Stop making excuses. Most of the others have filled twice as many baskets as you. How am I supposed to run a business? You need to be taught a lesson again. Turn round and lean over that bench, you good-for-nothing maggot. Turn round, I say. I said turn round or you'll be sorry. All right, then. You've asked for this. I'm going to whip your face so hard you won't have a single piece of flesh on it.
No. No, Master, no!
Get your hands off me. Robert Smith, help me.
Yes, sir. Ah, we got him now.
Well done, Roberts. And you too, Smith. There'll be a nice reward for you for that. But first, Another little task. Burn him. And make the others watch. It'll show them what heat really is.
Ah, yes, Mr. Hawkins. Do you want me to tie him to a stake and then have a nice bonfire set for him? Or would you like him strapped flat on a sheet of iron with a fire beneath him so he can fry nice and slow?
Never let it be said that I'm an unfeeling man, Mr. Roberts. Give him the choice. He can decide his own death.
Right-o, sir. Come this way. This'll teach you.
No, no, please don't. No, no, no!
Oh, God, that's awful. Did that sort of thing really go on?
Sometimes, yes. Man's inhumanity to man. Not all slave owners are as bad as that, but you would be horrified to know the conditions that many of these slaves have to work under. That is, if they survive the journey across the ocean.
But I thought most of the slaves was better off. Don't they get regular food and clothing and shelter? My mate Charlie says they're happier there than they was back in Africa.
Your friend Charlie doesn't know what he's talking about. Millions of people do not realize the evil that goes on so that some of our industries can thrive and so that we can enjoy cotton, tobacco and sugar. I do not blame you and Charlie. You have simply not been told the truth. But many of the top industrialists are fully aware of this, and so are some of the top politicians. But strong efforts were made to change things, and Spencer Perceval took risks to do so.
Ah, Stevens, how is our Mr. Wilberforce? Still trying to change the world?
Mr. Wilberforce is indeed not happy, Prime Minister. He is very bitter that you have not done more.
Not done more? That's a bit harsh. Does he not realise I've risked my political career for him?
I venture to suggest, sir, that you yourself know there is much to be done. And if we don't get rid of the world, not just of our slave trade, but of slavery itself.
I concede that, Stevens, but it is all about what is actually possible and what is not possible. We have made the Anti-Slave Trade Act work and enforced it as far as is within our power to do so. I've incurred enough wrath these past few years by curtailing those traders.
Mr. Wilberforce says that they are the last people who deserve any sympathy whatsoever. They are only worried about their pockets.
True. The late John Wesley warned us that vested interests do not give way very easily. And you and Mr. Wilberforce know full well that many of those vested interests are still flourishing here in the Palace of Westminster.
And they infect it like vermin.
But they are elected vermin. There are only so many rats that this rat catcher can catch, especially when they have so much support here in Parliament. A Parliament that I just about lead by the skin of my teeth. And let us not forget that many workers depend upon these vested interests in places such as Liverpool and Bristol.
With the greatest of respect, Prime Minister, Mr. Wilberforce and I feel that if you cannot act, then who can?
Henri, Philippe, join me for a drink now.
Certainement, mon empereur.
You have made all of us here in France so proud.
It is an honor to toast your latest victory.
Indeed, Emperor.
Pardon, Monsieur l'Empereur. Napoleon, I think you should know that Wellington has reinforced his army.
How much?
My informants estimated he has 20,000 men, and they look well armed.
Then we shall have to force more Spanish and Portuguese into enlisting with us. And we shall increase the blockade on the British. And tomorrow I shall meet Admiral Duval and tell him to prepare for us to invade by sea. The British have forced me to act.
We shall attack the islands from all sides. I shall have great delight in crushing their army, destroying their navy, trampling their people, and executing their leaders. I am very much looking forward to my victory march to the Palace of Westminster. Start my preparations.
Mais certainement, mon empereur.
We will teach those British a very painful lesson.
Vive la France!
I didn't know things was that bad.
Most people didn't know, but Spencer Perceval was well aware. He had contacts everywhere. He knew that Napoleon was addicted to power and to expanding his empire, and Perceval was determined to keep Napoleon off our shores. But it was not just the battles on land and at sea that put us under pressure. The trade war has given us huge problems.
What, you mean all that stuff about ships not being able to bring food and that into our country?
And also our ships not being able to transport merchandise abroad. You see, Napoleon has been trying for some years to stop our ships from trading with other countries by sea. He was not only targeting our ships, but also the ships of other countries that traded with us.
We couldn't let old Boney get away with that.
No, we certainly couldn't, Nell. That is why Spencer Perceval continued and enforced our efforts to do the same to France. But this has meant that we have lost many friends. He wanted to stop the trade of other countries with France, and this has also hit many of our top merchants and industrialists. So you could say that although Napoleon was Spencer Perceval's biggest enemy, the number of other powerful enemies was growing by the day.
What is the man trying to do? Does he want to destroy all of us in Liverpool and our businesses?
He's certainly going the right way about it.
These orders of council must stop. Perceval cannot go on like this. He has stopped our slave ships and now he is stopping virtually everything else. My business is at breaking point. My shareholders are making life very uncomfortable for me.
And my profits are doing it the right way too.
Well, I'm having to slash me workers' wages yet again. I keep telling them it's not my fault. It's this godforsaken government. We all know King George has gone mad, but I think the Prime Minister is even more insane.
I agree. These monstrous restrictions will bring ruin upon us all.
We cannot take this lying down.
Maybe we can give the demonstrators a little encouragement.
Oh, that is very underhand, but a good idea all the same. I'm sure you'll do a good job with that. I could take care of the political aspect and arrange for a deputation to Westminster. And what about you, my friend?
I'll give thought to other ways of resolving this.
Oh, Daisy, don't come down here in the kitchen trying to get me to tell you things that I shouldn't, because I'm not going to.
No, Mrs. N. I got some news for you.
Oh, really? Oh, well, pray tell me.
Well, I had just served Mr. Perceval a bit of lunch. He's been working away since 6 this morning. Anyway, when I was making my way past his cabinet secretary's office, the door was open a bit. I just happened to hear them talking. And you'll never guess.
Never guess what?
Mr. Perceval ain't rich at all.
Oh, come on now, Daisy. Mr. Perceval comes from good breeding and aristocracy. His late father was an earl or something. I was under the impression Mr. Perceval had pots of money.
Well, it turns out that he hasn't. Apparently, he was his late father's second son from his second marriage, and Mr. Perceval hardly got anything at all in the will, and that's why he had to work as a lawyer. He needed the money. I overheard them saying he gets a bit of family income, but not a lot. He gets paid for what he does here, but only for one job, not two. He's doing the Chancellor of Exchequer's job for nothing.
Oh, surely not.
Yes, Mrs. M. The Cabinet Secretary also couldn't understand why Mr. Perceval has given quite a bit of his money away.
Oh, that's daft, that is. He's got a lot of kids, you know.
Yes, certainly has. He's got lots of mouth to feed. But seriously, it turns out Mr. Perceval was also helping out a friend who'd fallen on hard times. And here's a real secret. He even put quite a lot of money towards Mr. Pitt's funeral costs.
Well, he can knock me down with a nightingale's feather. He's a rum one, he is.
Wait for this bit. Mr. Perceval has ordered his secretary to send some money anonymously to help one of his former colleagues' widow. But he don't want anyone to know about it.
Quite right. These things should be kept private, shouldn't they?
They certainly should, Mrs. M. They certainly should.
Oh, Spencer, are you still up? What is it? Napoleon or the slave traders?
If only it was that easy. No, it's neither of them.
It's the execution of Langton, isn't it?
Yes, but if only it was just an execution. That would seem relatively humane. But thanks to our Treason Act, the man has to be hung, drawn, and quartered. Jane, that goes so much against the grain.
Mine too, Spencer. Are we not still a Christian country?
We are, but we are also a democracy. The man must have been well aware of the Treason Act, and he should have thought about that before betraying his country. His actions may well lead to the slaughter of many thousands of our citizens. But I abhor the method of execution.
But surely you can do something.
It is the law of the land. I may be Prime Minister, but I cannot on my own change the law without the will of Parliament. I have indeed conveyed my opinion, but at the moment I cannot put our government at risk just for one man. When all is said and done, he sold his compatriots' secrets to Napoleon's regime. But you know, Jane, at times like this, I wish I was a desperate or a dictator who could damn well do what he likes.
Could you not ask the King or the Prince Regent to intervene?
The King is far too ill and confused, and I need to restrict my battles with our Prince Regent to wider matters. Oh, why did I take on this job?
That is not the husband I know. I've never seen you give up on anything. Surely you can enlist the support of Mr. Wilberforce?
Oh yes, I shall certainly get his backing, and no doubt William Cobbett will also gladly lend his vocal support. Although if all left to him, we'd probably give Langton a mere slap on the wrist and send him home after a night in the cells. Now, on this matter, I know I will not get a majority. Come on, Jane. Let's retire for the night.
Have you found a solution to the problem, then?
Well, what if the executioner was to make an oversight for just once in his career and merely hang Langton after all?
So they just hung him then?
Yes, Nell. That is horrible enough, but it is a lot better than emptying out someone's insides and quartering their body while they are still alive. It doesn't bear thinking about, though, does it?
Ugh. No, it don't. So Mr. Perceval, he was Bit of a crafty old blighter, then.
Oh, he was totally honest, but on rare occasions he had to find alternative ways of achieving what he wanted. But there was so much still to do, and he was being pressured from all sides, including across the Atlantic, in the White House itself.
Ephraim Epps, it's sure good to see you. What gives me the pleasure?
I don't see that there's much to get pleasured about, Mr. President.
Why? What's wrong?
Well, when we helped you get elected, we thought we were voting in a line. Seems that we got ourselves a mouse instead. You've been president 3 darn years, and that Spencer Perceval has been prime minister for around about the same time. And he seems to be calling the shots, not you. That don't sound like independence to me.
That is not true, Epps, and you know it. We're making real good progress since we won independence. I'm working hard to draw up a constitution that'll be the envy of the world.
We won't be the envy of anybody, Mr. President. We'll be the laughingstock. Perceval's virtually stopped us trading with France, and you don't seem that you want to do anything about it. I've invested my fortune in building up my business, and I don't want to see it ruined by that mad king's little old prime minister back in England. And it's just not the trading with France that he's interfering with. He had the audacity to lecture to the United States about slavery. He calls it an unchristian evil. Well, I don't take that personally, and so should you. You got darn more slaves than I've got. Never thought I'd have the president of my country prepared to sit down and let an insignificant Englishman preach to him what's right and what's wrong.
I'm not just sitting back, Epps. I have made strong protestations.
There's nothing strong about letting the British board our ships and even take some of our crew and pressing them in to join the British Navy.
That's only because they were deserters from the British in the first place. And you know that, Epps.
Mr. President, I had a lot of respect for you, and I got you a lot of support when you needed it. Why, if I was in your shoes, I'd be mighty worried about supporting draining away. In fact, I'll be mighty worried about losing my job here in the White House. You know what I would do if I were president? I'd take a look across that Atlantic Ocean and see that Britain has an awful lot of bad things going on. I also see that Napoleon Bonaparte fella is giving them a lot of big trouble, and I recognize that they're being very preoccupied. I say to myself that now is the time to take issue with them, whilst that they're the most vulnerable. In fact, they're so preoccupied, I think I'll be saying to myself that there is a great opportunity to building up our own empire, maybe grabbing ourselves just a little bit more territory. You did well in Louisiana. You did, well, you know, there's even richer pickings down south, Mr. President. If you don't want to take advantage of that, maybe our country will find someone else who does.
Ah, Mr. Wilberforce. Somehow I knew I'd be getting a visit from you. Take a seat, William. All right, then, if you prefer to stand. You really are never satisfied, are you? No, please listen. It is all very well for you to say I should be more liberal and more humane, but how exactly am I to achieve that? I have made conditions for convicts and deportees much less grim than they were. I've ensured our soldiers and sailors are better fed and equipped than ever before. I've continually supported you. I want to get rid of slavery as much as you do, and I share your desire that no single being shall be snatched from their homeland and forced into slavery, and that every single slave shall one day be unchained and set free. But do you think it's easy stopping those slave traders? They're not exactly joyful when our Navy's ships board them and confiscate their ships and release the slaves into freedom. And now the likes of William Cobbett want me to give in to the Luddites. They are causing so much trouble that we are currently having more of our soldiers dealing with them than fighting Napoleon's armies. I do have sympathy for their fears over their jobs, but I cannot just let anarchy rule. I cannot let them continue to destroy machinery, and I cannot stand by and let them murder factory owners. You saw what happened in France when mob rule was allowed to take over. Is that what you really want for our country? I know your heart is in the right place, but you really must show more patience, William. If you can direct your talents and fortitude to supporting our government, we are far more likely to achieve our dreams than if we push our colleagues over the brink and bring our government down. For if that happens, we may be denied the opportunity for evermore. With God's will, I'm optimistic that the years ahead will be much better for our country and for the freedom of all people.
I'm sorry, Prime Minister. I'm terribly sorry to interrupt, but a message has just reached us. The President of the United States has threatened to declare war on Britain.
Remember what we agreed. I don't want any of you backing out. Think of your families. Think of your jobs. Think of the future. Once we break the doors down, I want you into that factory in all haste. I want you to see each and every one of those stocking frames smashed to bits within minutes. Imagine each and every one of them is old Bonaparte himself.
We will, Ludlam, we will. You can be certain of that.
Well, that's the idea, Miller. So don't none of you feel sorry for Cartwright, the meanest man in Yorkshire. He didn't feel sorry for you, and he had been warned.
He'll get no sympathy from me.
Yeah, but what if these men try and stop us?
Don't worry, Vandroff. I will deal with that. Right, men. We've no time to lose. Remember, every hour blow on those machines is a strike against evil itself. Let's go.
Prime Minister, I beg you to reconsider things before it's too late. You're making too many powerful enemies. And these are enemies that should be our allies.
Well, Lord Liverpool, they are not tasked with defeating Napoleon. We are. They have fallen for his flattery and false promises, just like Austria, Prussia and Russia did. No doubt to their lifelong regrets. Ireland and America must not be deluded. Bonaparte starts like an ardent suitor, courting a very innocent sweetheart. He gently coaxes, lovingly pursues, and adoringly whispers platitudes of lifelong devotion and promises of unending bliss. Then, when he has won her confidence and gained entry into her boudoir, he suddenly turns into a brutal fiend. It is not only in our interest that we keep the French out of Ireland and America, it is in their interest as well.
Prime Minister, Lord Liverpool, I regret to inform you that I am receiving alarming news of more disturbances in the north. There are estimates of hundreds of stocking machines being destroyed, and the West Horton Mill in Lancashire has been completely burnt to the ground.
That's just what I feared, Home Secretary. We cannot let this continue. Prime Minister, we must act now.
Thank you, Home Secretary. Lord Liverpool, I agree. Richard, get me Lord Sidmouth, Camden, Eldon and Westmoreland in all haste.
Things was getting really nasty then.
Yes. There were some terrible riots and much damage and bloodshed, and bad news from elsewhere.
The Prince Regent will see you now, Prime Minister.
Thank you, Lady Rose. Good afternoon, Your Highness. Bad news at sea.
Yes, I was mortified, Prime Minister. You know those Chinese vases are virtually irreplaceable. Those deckhands are so careless at times.
No, Your Highness. I was referring to the loss of HMS Taunton, just off Brittany. I believe 30 of our soldiers and sailors were drowned, and another 20 have been captured.
Oh, yes, jolly bad luck, Prime Minister. What do you propose?
We must double our resolve. That's what I propose.
Is that not foolhardy?
With the greatest of respect, Your Majesty, we are still in the ascendancy on the seas. We must certainly not lose our resolve just because of one tragic setback. With that in mind, I need your immediate blessing for the government to continue enforcing the orders of the Council.
Are you sure, Perceval? I understand from Lord Chatham that your cabinet are at odds over this. And I have a number of representations from senior backbenchers.
I know, Your Highness, that we have not always seen eye to eye, and I fully understand your reticence on this very unpopular measure. But if we do not continue with these orders of council, and if we allow foreign shipping to trade with France, we shall be playing right into Napoleon's hands. He's expecting us to lose our resolve. He's expecting to beat us in a trade war. He is trying to exclude us from Europe and indeed trading anywhere abroad. He aims to inflict revolt and famine on our country. He assumes only then can he beat us on the battlefield or on the seas. But Your Majesty, so long as I am Prime Minister, we will not yield an inch to him.
You really are a stubborn old devil, Perceval. You know full well that it would stir up the Constitution if I do not support you on this. But I warn you, my patience is wearing very thin.
I humbly thank you, Your Majesty.
Anyway, to change the subject, what do you know about this blasted Bellingham chap? I've had a letter delivered here from the man. He wants to make me to make good on all of his losses, but from bankruptcy, and to compensate him for the time he spent languishing in that Russian jail. Is he a buffoon or a drunkard?
Oh, yes, that Buckingham fellow. Most unfortunate, that. He's been making representations against the government for some time. I have great sympathy for his predicament, but we cannot be held responsible for his misfortunes in commerce. And I have it on good authority, he's only himself to blame. Indeed, there are allegations that the real reason things turned sour for him was because of illegal trading and a fraudulent maritime insurance claim.
Well, he seems to think he has a strong case. Anyway, it's nothing to do with me whatsoever. Can you get one of your clerks to write to this idiot Bellingham and tell him to stop troubling me?
I shall do more than that, Your Highness. I shall write to him personally. Thanks for getting back so quickly, Henry. I'm sure you're very tired after your travels. But pray, please tell me that the mood of our people has lightened a little.
I regret that I cannot. The unrest is growing, especially in Liverpool.
Not unexpected, I suppose.
But, sir, I believe the situation commands more urgency. There are very strong rumblings of discontent, particularly in our industrial cities and ports. And it grieves me to say it, but even more protests are being planned against you and the government.
What are they saying?
Well, sir, they are...
Be as honest with me as you always are, Henry.
Well, businessmen are saying that you tax them to keep them poor. And workers say that they don't have enough food. And the merchants and industrials are saying you restrict their foreign trade to keep them from prospering.
Don't they realise that we restrict their trade to keep them from supporting those who supply France? The window tax only applies to larger houses, and we only keep those taxes high so that we can eventually be free from the threat of Napoleon's tyranny.
I know that, sir. And I know, too, that the terrible harvests are not your fault, but the people do not understand.
Maybe they would, if they were not being influenced by vested interests, Henry.
Another thing, sir. They say that you and Wilberforce care more about the freedom of Africans in far-off lands than you do about the conditions of your own people here in Britain and Ireland.
I'm sorry they see it that way. It is not true, of course. But I guess their grievances are to be expected. If only I could explain things to them.
But how can you do that? You can hardly go riding on a horse up and down the country like John Wesley. You simply do not have the time. It grieves me that not enough of your colleagues have come forward to help. I really don't know how they can stand by and let you cope with three of the most senior posts in the government.
Thank you for your concern, Henry, but...
I know it's not my place to question your decision, Prime Minister.
But?
I make the point with great reluctance, sir. But aren't you making things even more difficult for yourself? Why don't you defer your efforts to fight slavery? Why don't you ease up on taxes and foreign trade? Then perhaps people would have a much different view of you and the government.
When the King asked me to accept the position of Prime Minister, he bestowed upon me the primary duty to protect our people. That is my paramount obligation to him and to our country. I know our taxes and trade embargoes are hurting, but it really is the only way we can keep up the fight against the most evil warlord that Europe has ever known. If my information is correct, Henry, we may have every chance of being rid of Napoleon within the next 2 to 3 years. Then, and only then, can we unshackle the taxpayers and the traders, knowing that we have ensured the safety and freedom of all of our subjects. That day seems far off now, but it will come. And as for slavery, the late John Wesley was right when he stated, liberty is the right of every human creature. As soon as he breathes a vital air, and no human law can deprive him of that right. I vowed to myself, Henry, that when I meet my Maker and he asks me, what did you do to help end the abomination of that heinous practice? I will be able to say, my Lord, I did what I could within the power given to me by you. Although I hope I have a few more years on this good earth before then.
must say, he was a stubborn old soul, wasn't he?
He certainly was, Nell.
I heard he weren't too popular, but I didn't know too much about it, really. No one really explained things like that to us working girls. Maybe they didn't want to trouble our pretty little minds.
Yes. Well, there was one other person who certainly had a lot on his mind, Nell.
Give me another drink, landlady.
No, you've had too much already.
Do you think I am too poor to buy another drink?
No, sir, I think it's because you are too drunk to be able to cope with it. Besides, you haven't paid me for the last one yet.
It's okay, madam. I'll pay. And I'll vouch for him. Bring him another tankard.
Another tankard? Are you sure, Mr. Telfer?
Yes. Now please do it. Now, Mr...
Bellingham. John Bellingham.
John Bellingham. Oh, yes, I've heard about you. Coming in here night after night, voicing your displeasure with the government.
Displeasure is putting it mildly.
Here is the tankard, Mr. Telfer. I hope you know what you're doing.
Here, John. Console yourself with this. So, John, what exactly is your grievance? I do not know of you as a slave trader, nor a radical, nor an industrialist. And you certainly do not like a rioter, nor an artisan to me.
I have been so very wronged by our government. Through the negligence of their ambassador, I lost my livelihood, and got not a penny in compensation. And I do not have the means to get justice. But you would not understand.
Maybe I would.
He really had a bee in his bonnet, didn't he?
There were many different bees in different bonnets, Nell, and sometimes in the most unusual of places.
So, Senator Cummings, this is where my dollars go? A downtown Kentucky saloon bar?
Mr. Ambrose, you've no right to follow me here.
I'm not liking what I'm seeing from our president.
You are never satisfied. Just like those industrialists, they're always cajoling him into taking action to help entrepreneurs. Yet they squawk like parakeets when Madison finally does something decisive. They were the same with President Jefferson. And if I remember rightly, Mr. Ambrose, you were one of them.
You know full well what I mean, Senator. I'm not talking about Madison. I'm talking about Madison declaring war on Britain. If he does that, it will surely be suicidal for our trade.
What more can the man do? He's a damn fine president, and him and Thomas Jefferson have done a mighty lot for independence and freedom.
They ain't exactly giving much independence and freedom for the American Redskins, nor the slaves on their plantations.
Well, Redskins are just savages, and you know it. And Jefferson and Madison have always been quite correct about slavery and freedom. It's every American's right to be free to have slaves if he wants to. Otherwise, how else are we going to run this country and keep our plantations going?
Well, that's for another day. If Madison is set declaring war on Britain, it will be a mortal blow to our trade. And the citizens are scared too.
But these Britishers have to be taught a lesson. Just like we tanned their hides when we won our independence.
This is totally different and you know it. They can now whip our hides, for sure, on the seas. I've been told they got 5 or 6 times the fleet we have, and their army are no longer a bunch of chicken farmers and shopkeepers. Emperor Bonaparte soon found that out. I've sunk my life savings into our export business, Cummins, and my Bessie can't sleep at night because she's worried. Especially with them Redskins now taking the side of the British.
Those varmints are as bad as the slaves, ungrateful wretches.
I think our taking their land off them might just have something to do with that, don't you think? Anyway, surely Madison can negotiate with that British Prime Minister, Percy man?
It's Perceval. Spencer Perceval.
That's what I meant, Spencer Perceval. I heard he's about as uncooperative as that William Pitt was. But like it or not, if we get him in a war against us, we could regret it. We might even lose much of the territory we gained in that Louisiana purchase, sure. We doubled the size of our country in the last 10 years. We could damn well lose as much of it again if we're foolhardy enough to take on the British in a full-scale war.
Ambrose, no matter how much you pay me, there's nothing I can personally do to stop Madison declaring war. There are too many hawks pressing him to do that. He ain't really got no alternative. So long as those British government orders of council are being imposed on our trading with France, the pressure on Madison is building up to intolerable levels.
Ain't anyone gonna see this Perceval guy? To try getting him to change his mind about those damn orders of the council?
Oh, sure, that's been tried. That cussed old Prime Minister, he won't budge an inch.
Then maybe it's time they found themselves another Prime Minister.
Prime Minister, when are you going to act? People are losing jobs due to machines and mechanization, and yet you and your government are doing nothing.
I cannot stop progress, Mr. Cobbett. We are a free country and a democracy. Our inventors and industrialists are leading the world in innovation, equipping our forces and in helping our country grow.
That may satisfy your government ambitions, but what about the poor and the unemployed?
They are just the very people who will ultimately benefit. Our industrial progress will mean more jobs and prosperity for all. We now have nearly 16 million people to feed and clothe, Mr. Cobbett. Now, somehow we just about managed that. But after such poor harvest, it is getting harder, and the French blockade adds to our difficulty. Our only hope is by being more productive. Otherwise, we could end up like many other countries, with peasants and serfs dying of starvation and much of the population living in extreme poverty and squalor.
So that is your yardstick, Prime Minister. So long as our workers are just that bit better off than some of the other people in the world, you don't think that we need to do anything about improving...
I never said that, Mr. Cobbett. I am sorry that workers are sometimes misplaced when machinery is introduced. But I believe these are temporary setbacks. Our workers and their families will all benefit in time.
That will be too late.
But we cannot turn the clock back, William. But I can assure you that so long as I am in charge of this government, we will be mindful of casualties and we will try to help them. Steps have been taken to improve conditions, though I concede that much more remains to be done.
That's an understatement.
Do not overlook that our enterprising engineers and entrepreneurs are developing canals and machinery that can transport food to feed people, machines to clothe them, weapons to defend them, and now steam engines to move them. I'm not going to jeopardize all that in order to satisfy your radical ideals.
They are not radical, they are just common sense.
They are radical, extremely so, and I certainly will not countenance damaging our country's machinery, nor its future, Mr. Cobbett.
You seem more interested in listening to that misguided buffoon Wilberforce. You both show more affection for the ungrateful slaves in the Caribbean than the deserving labourers of this country.
I resent that. You really are outrageous, William.
Well, him and all his do-gooding don't seem to do much real good at all. Always setting up some long-winded, idiotic, worthy cause. Last year, it was the Society for Improving Manners Among the Citizens of Industrial Towns. Now he's got informed the Friendly Female Society for the Relief of Poor, Infirm, Aged Widows and Single Women of Good Character who have seen better days. What next? The Society for Impoverished Church Bell Ringers.
Oh, Mr. Cobbett, if only your grace was as strong as your wit. Anyway, I will not change course.
You really are a stubborn man, Prime Minister.
They was really putting the pressure on Mr. Perceval, weren't they?
Yes, Nell. Lots of people were. The government had to be firm enough to quell disorder at home without provoking revolution and rebellion.
A bit like me trying to control my scallywags.
And they needed to raise money for troops by keeping high taxes so that we could defeat Napoleon and prevent him invading us. Some folks said they were too harsh, but others said they were not harsh enough.
Like trying to make ends meet. Ain't easy.
It certainly was not. The pressure was getting greater all the time. Certain letters were going across the Atlantic as things were reaching fever pitch.
I beseech you, Prime Minister, to cease your illegal actions against the United States. No more taking our ships and impressing their crews into joining your Navy.
Mr. President, they are not illegal. We only take your ships when they are full of slaves or full of goods for supporting France and Napoleon's forces against Britain and Ireland. And we only take your sailors when we discover they are in fact our sailors, bribed into deserting their post with the British Navy to earn dollars working for your merchants.
And we will not countenance you supporting the Native American Indians and encouraging them to take up the hatchet against us.
We support the Native Americans because you are destroying their way of life. They choose to take up the hatchet because your government is cheating them of their territories. If you take away their ancestral past, you give them no future.
I demand you remove the orders of the Council.
Mr. President, I will only do so if you stop supporting France.
I will not have a British Prime Minister dictating to an American President.
I will not have our former allies supplying, feeding and clothing a ruthless warmonger who is a major threat to my country's very survival.
Then this must be war.
Then that would be deeply regrettable.
Blimey, it was all happening, weren't it?
Yes, Nell. And President Madison wasn't the only formidable opponent that Mr. Perceval had to worry about.
I think we both know why I've asked you here, Prime Minister.
I must confess I'm not totally sure, Your Highness, but...
My year of your limitations on my power is now up.
Oh, that?
Yes, that.
It need not be a matter of conflict between us, Your Highness. I can assure you that I will continue as before, if by your grace you wish me to do so.
What about my civil list? Now, surely it is time for that to be removed. I do not see any justification whatsoever for keeping that ridiculous limit on my expenditure.
On the contrary, Your Highness, I think it may be in your interest, as well as ours, for us to leave things as they are.
How can it possibly be in my interest?
It would be seen as a noble gesture for the Prince Regent to voluntarily agree to continue the limitation. Parliament and the British people would see that as a good sign of leadership and sacrifice, at the very time when they too are tightening their belts. Your Highness.
Do you think so?
I certainly do. And you would still have a good allowance, but without the need for yet more battles on this in Parliament.
And presumably no need for the newspapers to make up any more unkind stories about me.
That would indeed be another benefit, Your Highness.
But what about my right to continue granting sinecures? It is the monarch's historical privilege.
I am ill at ease with such favouritism and patronage, Your Highness. Times have moved on, and this was, after all, one of the very things that caused such ill feeling in France before the Revolution.
You keep going on about France, which reminds me. Why do you persist with the orders of the council? And why have you maintained taxes at such a high rate? Surely the millions of pounds you are spending maintaining our troops and navy is no longer justified.
I promised your father that I would not waver from defiance against France.
But surely now is the time for easing up.
Not when we are at last within sight of defeating Bonaparte and his evil regime.
Such optimism is certainly not borne out by your opponents in the House of Commons and the House of Lords. Anyway, if we are in a stronger position, surely now is the right time to negotiate peace and put an end to all this costly distraction.
That was previously tried and it failed, much to our cost. Napoleon's definition of peace is a period of cheating between two periods of fighting.
But surely you must allow some leeway, Prime Minister.
Your Highness, may I respectfully remind you that although Emperor Bonaparte is an outstanding officer, he is certainly no gentleman. As soon as he senses that an enemy is at its weakest, he strikes ruthlessly.
Prime Minister, the financial restraints are far too rigid. You must make some concessions.
I cannot do so, Your Highness. We simply cannot afford it. However, if you are not satisfied with my leadership, I will, of course, make my way back to Ealing and will let you have my written resignation by this time tomorrow. It has been a privilege to serve yourself and the King.
Stop! Mr. Perceval, you know full well that the King will be most unhappy if I let you go. He may be unbalanced, but he is still my father, and I cannot risk causing him more distress. Besides, I just don't think I can put up with Canning and Casterly again.
Still working, Spencer? Another reply to Wilberforce?
Not this time, dear. Just finishing a letter to young Spencer. I felt I had to point out that his final year of studies at Harrow is as important as all the previous years put together, and that he ought to spend just a little less time playing football.
You worry about him too much. I think he has inherited your energy. Next thing we know, he will probably be volunteering to join the army.
I would not put that past him, but that would worry me.
Well, you volunteered, and you served for several years.
That was nothing. My heart goes out to our young men now. We are blessed in this country to have such a heroic and sturdy breed serving in our army and navy. But there is another side of that we must never forget.
What do you mean?
Here is a poem that the Foreign Secretary brought back. He was sent this by a 17-year-old volunteer. I can almost hear the lad reciting it.
Today, I killed for the very first time, just like a soldier should. Yet when we first all volunteered, it seemed so very good to fight for king and country and stand for what is right. We were the boys from Middlesex and not afraid to fight. We joined the Hyde Park thousands who showed how much we cared. If Napoleon came invading us, well, we would not be scared. Within 2 weeks, we trained and worked to learn the infantry ways, the marching, charging and marksmanship to serve us through the days. When we would fight the enemy, those Frenchmen led by him, the emperor who conquers all, but us Brits won't let him win. Wellington then led us into Spain to meet the French head on. They had to be taught a lesson in what was right and what was wrong. Us Middlesex boys were not aware of the dangers we would face, the horrors and the tragedies of that God-forsaken place. We charged at dawn on the Iberian plain. Our world would never be the same again. The battlefield soon turned from green to red. Cannonballs and bullets left many men for dead. Some were my pals from Middlesex. Many mowed down in their prime. We knew we all must die someday, but this was well before our time. The stench of smoke and burned flesh, and the screams and shouts of terror filled my head as I charged on and on. No time for any error. I drew my bayonet and thrust it forth towards a Frenchman's head. It was him or me. I had no choice if I was to stay alive. We were locked in mortal combat. Which one of us would still survive? Face to face, I saw his eyes, open wide as he felt the pain. He slumped right down in front of me. He would never breathe again. He was but a lad, a fresh-faced youth, sent like me to fight a war. He was a mother's son, a sturdy chap, but he would not live no more. I pulled through somehow, my mind a blur. We won, but I still felt sad. For today, I killed for the very first time. And yes, it hurt so bad.
Oh, Daisy, there seems a lot of goings on here today. What's happening then?
Well, I overheard Mr. Hatherop saying there's a lot of trouble in the House of Commons. The opposition have said they're not standing for these high taxes anymore. So Mr. Perceval has had to get his cabinet together and have a quick meeting, and now they're off to the Houses of Parliament. It's going to be close.
Oh, my goodness. There's never been so much excitement there since they captured Guy Fawkes.
I greatly respect the right honourable member's concerns, but now is the very time not to yield. We must continue to ensure that our troops and our sailors are properly funded, thoroughly trained, decently fed and adequately supplied. It is easy for you to say that we have already got the measure of the Emperor. That's what the Prussians thought. That's what the Austrians thought. So too did the Spanish and the Portuguese and the Turks before them. It is only by devoting such resources to our navy and to Wellington that we can hope to match Bonaparte. He has a far bigger population and he is far more ruthless. We must prevent Bonaparte and his army landing on our soil. And I will remind you all how he treats his vanquished foes. You need only recall what happened at the siege of Jaffa, when his troops bayoneted or drowned the entire population of 2,000, women and children as well as men and soldiers. That is how he treats his enemies. It is our duty to make sure that no British family ever suffers in this way. I will not let that happen while I am Prime Minister. I beg you and your colleagues to support me on this.
Well, he gave as good as he got then.
Yes, Nell, he certainly did. When he had to. Generally, though, he tended to be calm and quiet and just get on with the job. And there was one observer in Westminster who regularly watched his every move.
Excuse me, sir, that gentleman who gave that speech, that was the Prime Minister, was it not?
Yes, it was. I am one of his opponents, so I hate to say it, but he did rather a convincing job there. Why do you ask?
I'm studying politics, and it has always fascinated me. So whilst in London, I decided to come along here to the House of Commons and get a better idea of what goes on. I read the newspapers, and I've heard of Perceval, but of course I had no idea what he looked like.
Yes, he's rather an insignificant-looking chap. And frankly, between you and I, none of us ever thought he would be up for the job. He's a cussed old warrior, though. Hardly ever looks perturbed. Usually in a highly charged debate, many of us look rather the worse for wear at the end of it. But Perceval, he just strolls out of the chamber as calm as anything. You'll probably see him with his prayer book pass by here through the lobby very shortly, looking like he hasn't got a care in the world.
He'll be coming through here shortly.
Yes, any time now. So you'll be able to get a good close-up look at the man himself.
Oh, that would be excellent. Really excellent.
So old Perceval really put them in their place then?
Apparently so, Mrs. M. Once Mr. Perceval reminded him the way Boney treats people he conquers, the House of Commons went quiet. He had a point, though, didn't he?
Oh, he certainly did. It don't bear thinking about what Bonaparte's army can do. Although our armies haven't been angels in the past, but from what I gather, according to Mr. Pitt, our secret is that we allow the people in our empire the liberty to develop life in their own way. Old Bonaparte, he tries to dominate them and break their spirit. But he's paying the price now. The more conquests he makes, the more foes he has waiting for him. Mind you, those enemies of his still need our help. We're the only countries that stood up to Boney all these years without giving in. God knows it hasn't been easy.
Oh, I must tell you this, Mrs. M. This'll make you laugh. I heard that last week, when the leader of the opposition had a right go at Mr. Perceval and rambled on and on about I don't know what, he then said, "Well, Prime Minister, what is your response to that?" Apparently, Mr. Perceval replied, "I've nothing to add to the nothing that has already been said." The whole house roared with laughter. That stopped him right in his tracks.
That's one way to shut a windbag up. Oh, good old Perceval, I say. He's getting the hang of the job after all.
I thought I would find you here, Bellingham. You're becoming quite a regular in this tavern. How are things going, then?
No luck yet from the government.
They have no right to treat you that way. No right at all.
I have written many letters. I have even been to number 10 Downing Street after I got Perceval's reply. But the Prime Minister's secretary would not let me in.
What replies did you get then?
Oh, the usual polite but curt responses saying it was not the government's fault. Not the government's fault. Well, who else can I turn to? My business was ruined whilst I was rotting in a Russian jail. Nobody paid my family. Nobody tried to get me out. And nobody compensated me.
Yeah, that's no way to treat a hard-working merchant. So, what are you going to do next?
Well, I've been thinking.
Uh-huh. You've been thinking what?
Well, actually, I was told by a senior officer to do what I think I must.
So, what do you think you must?
Well, I would have to do something that would make them pay a penalty, if not a price. Maybe I must do something more decisive. Far more decisive.
Do you think you're capable of doing so?
I'm a very determined man, Mr. West. However, I am very low on resources. I need money to stay down here in London, to pay my rent, and to cover certain other costs. Otherwise, I fear I shall just have to go back to Liverpool. And I will have to do so very soon.
Yeah, it would be a shame to go back before you've finished your quest for justice, wouldn't it?
Yes, it certainly would.
I mean, no man should be deprived of his rightful justice. I will see if one or two of us can rustle up some funds.
That would be most kind of you, sir.
Think nothing of it, Bellingham. I have some most charitable friends whose hearts are in the right place.
Men, it is an honour to be your Duke of Wellington, and I stand here today as a very proud man. When I returned here to Portugal 3 years ago, there were just 28,000 of us British troops, plus 16,000 Portuguese troops. And we faced a British army, a French army here of 360,000. And it was an army that had conquered Europe and expanded the French Empire. We have often been outnumbered, and it has not been easy to supply you with enough guns, cannons and horses to take on our enemy. We have never underestimated Napoleon Bonaparte, but now the time has come for us just not to defend this peninsula, but to go on the offensive. You were victorious at Rodrigo and Vandejos. We brought the French garrison to its knees. We must now turn our energies to mounting a new decisive campaign which will not only appease the doubters back at home, but will set Napoleon Bonaparte and his army scuttling out of Europe. We will now fight our way to justice, honour and victory!
How nice to have you home to myself at last.
I know I'm a very lucky man.
A very hard-working man. It's about time you had some rest and spent time with me and the children. They loved having you around, and Jane was so thrilled that you were able to be with her at her confirmation.
I've loved every minute of it. It's quite rare these days for all 14 of us to make the church service.
That was a lovely meal that Mrs. Millerton made for us all. She's a real treasure, that lady. So discreet and trustworthy, too.
Yes, she certainly is. I will need her in Downing Street tomorrow, though.
Oh, darling, I thought you didn't have to work tomorrow.
Unfortunately, I've got some very important papers I've just got to go through. But I may not need to go to the House of Commons at all. It depends on how the debate goes. The opposition have pushed hard for the subject of orders of the council to be reviewed, yet again. I'm hoping I will not be needed there, though. If all goes to plan, I can finish my paperwork and be back here in time for an early night. I'm looking forward to seeing young Spencer performing his school speech day tomorrow.
He will be delighted if you can be there, if only to prove to you that he has not neglected his studies for football.
Yes.
You don't talk about it much, but how are things?
I gather I'm not liked by too many of the people, and my colleagues in Parliament seem to be losing patience. We British have gone through a difficult few years, but hopefully it will have all been worth it. I certainly haven't enjoyed all the decisions I've made, and I'm sure I've made a number of mistakes. But I've always done what I believe to be right. I pray to God that we can see our people through the threat of Napoleon. Then we can set our hands to solving some of the other problems that, sadly, I've had to set aside until the time is right. Hopefully next year, by 1813, I will be able to put my hand to resolving Catholic emancipation and further reforms of Parliament, as well as making life easier for the poor people in our society. And God willing, we'll be able to make much further inroads into ridding the world of slavery altogether.
Well, that should certainly help you get William Wilberforce off your back.
Oh, yes. Dear old William Wilberforce. No matter how much I do for him, he is never happy with me, but a blessed man all the same.
Well, he certainly can be a blessed nuisance much of the time.
never have to be a Prime Minister.
I don't think it's something that you will ever need to worry yourself about, Nell.
But everyone was getting at him, though.
Indeed they were. And one person in particular was determined not to give up.
Mr. Bellingham, I'm so glad I caught you before you go out. Will you be wishing to dine with us all this evening? It's just that I'm preparing a nice stew for Mrs. Robertson, young Master Robertson. I want to be sure I make enough. I know you're a busy man these days with all your meetings and what have you, so I just thought I would check.
As it happens, Miss Figgins, I will be joining Mr. Roberts and her son at the European Museum this afternoon. But I won't be coming back with them. I have other matters to attend to.
It must be so good to lead such an interesting life, Mr. Bellingham. Oh, did you get those packages okay last week?
Yes, yes, everything was fine. They were gifts that I ordered for my wife and my children.
Oh, you must miss them so much.
Yes, now if you will please excuse me, Miss Figgins, I really must be on my way.
Is it anything nice you will be doing this evening, Mr. Bellingham?
It's a business matter. Now I really must go.
I guess it must be important business then.
It is important business, yes. And long overdue business.
Gentlemen, gentlemen! Look, the Prime Minister's got enough on his plate already. This debate has gone on far too long. Look, let's give him the support that he needs.
Absolutely not. It was only right that we sent for him. It's high time the orders of the Council were abandoned, or at least greatly modified.
Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte is to blame, not the Prime Minister.
It's easy for you to say that, Mr. Peel. Perhaps you wouldn't be so lenient if it was you who had to face an ugly mob in a Nottingham marketplace last week.
Gentlemen, look, he's here now. He's just come through the lobby door. Let him at least take his place in the debating chamber before we continue this argument.
I'm sorry, gentlemen, but I couldn't get here earlier. Excuse me, Mr. Man.
Mr. Perceval's been shot. Mr. Perceval's shot.
God, no! I ain't murdered!
We must get the Prime Minister attended to. Get a move on. Somebody help him. Who did this?
Where is he? Who is he?
This is the man. I have him here.
I'm afraid so, Daisy. He didn't stand a chance. It was a bloke called Bellingham who did it. I'm told the bullet was so close to Mr. Perceval's heart that he could never recover. They carried him into an office, but he couldn't be resuscitated. They say he died whilst laid out on a desk.
I heard everyone was upset when he got shot, even those who were constantly arguing with him.
Yes. It seemed he had many politicians who may have differed with his opinions, but they all liked him as a man, except some of those out on the streets who seem to think that now the Prime Minister's gone, well, our problems will go as well. They've got another thought coming there, though. I lost my temper with my Ernest last week. He said, "What has Perceval ever done for us, apart from the Save the Pound note and Regent's Park?" I said, "He's kept our people safe, he has. He's helped keep old Napoleon Bonaparte at bay. And he's kept our country together."
I never thought of it that way, Mrs. M.
Well, of course we'll be devastated. He reckoned the Prime Minister was the kindest and most conscientious man he ever knew, and that he helped to save 40,000 slaves a year. Many poor souls will miss him. I will miss him too.
It shouldn't have happened, Mrs. M. It shouldn't have happened.
So, that was what all the commotion in the street was about. Some people actually thought it was good what we'd lost our Prime Minister. But Bellingham got caught, didn't he?
Yes, Nell. They arrested Bellingham on the spot. He didn't put up a struggle. He admitted he did it. He seemed proud of it. He was quickly tried and found guilty. His defence tried to claim that he was insane, but Bellingham would have none of it.
But why did he do it?
I cannot give you an honest answer, Nell. It seems he was demented with a grievance against the government. Not a grievance, though, that could ever justify any action of that type.
Was he on his own? Did other people put him up to it?
That is a very good question, Nell. Because of Spencer Perceval's courage, there are powerful vested interests and enemies who may have helped Bellingham. Bellingham said not. But maybe we'll never know now. They hung him this morning. Do you know, when he was in his cell, a beautiful letter of forgiveness was sent from Jane Perceval and her family, even though they were absolutely devastated.
Oh, bless them. So, after all what Mr. Perceval went through, it all ended like that. He never had time to finish things proper, did he?
No, Nell, but possibly he has already done a lot that will make a difference. Maybe some of us will now realise that. Despite the weight of the world on his shoulders, he did more than any Prime Minister to help the fight against slavery. God bless him for that. And God bless you too, Nell.
Thank you. Anyway, mister, just who are you? You never did give me your name.
It's William. William Wilberforce.
Thank you so much. You've been a wonderful audience. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Rachel, and everybody at All Saints Church. And thank you, Spencer Perceval.
3 years a Prime Minister, you heard Sue Ford as Nell, Robert Hardy as the Gentleman, Ernest Burden as Napoleon, Oswald, Master Hawkins, Garforth, Madison, Ryder and West, Nick Hampshire as Philippe, Ratcliffe, the Slave, the Soldier and Robert Peel, James Ford Bannister as Henri, the Prince Regent, Bellingham and Ambrose, Sarah Sophia Paco as the King's Maid, Mella, Lady Rose and Miss Figgins, Robin Whitbread as the King, Eckersley, Cummins, Cobbett and Huskisson, Geoff Buckingham as Spencer Perceval, Patricia Williamson as Mrs. M, Olwen Hole as Daisy, Sue Dye as Mrs. Perceval, David Young as Captain White, Bathurst, General Berthier, Brandhurst, Henry and Lord Eldon, Robert Chantler as Burdett, Rob Day as Wellington, Roberts, Epps and Ludlam, and Alan Saunders as Lord Liverpool, Green, Collingson, Telfer and Sheridan. The play was written and directed by Geoff Buckingham and produced for radio by Robert Chantler. It was performed by the Manor Players and recorded live at All Saints Church in Ealing, London.